Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm Catherine Hadro in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thanks for joining us. In this week's show, we speak out against an abortion activist spreading propaganda to kids. Praying for the unborn, we highlight the 9 Days for Life novena. And this.
Through biology, we know that a unique human life begins during conception, and from that point onward, there's an entire human organism present.
Meet one of the young faces who will be speaking at next week's March for Life. But first, our top story, the U.S. House of Representatives has voted to repeal a major pro-life policy.
Let us say this clearly. The United States should never underwrite abortions. Taxpayers deserve better, children deserve better, and families deserve better.
And one of the first acts of the new Congress, House Democrats voted last week to pass a funding bill that would repeal the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance policy. That is the Trump administration's expansion of the Mexico City policy, which bans foreign aid from going to non-governmental organizations that promote or pay for abortion procedures. To help us break this all down is our pro-life panel this week. Marjorie Dannenfelser is president of the Susan B. Anthony List, and Tom McClusky is president of March for Life Action. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
To be with Tom.
This is an excellent panel, especially for this week in particular. Tom, first off, can you walk us through this pro-life policy that the U.S. House voted to repeal?
Well, it's a policy that's been in place since 1984, and that protects U.S. taxpayers from having to pay and subsidize abortions overseas. And it's something that Republican presidents always implement and Democratic presidents always repeal. Mm-hmm. President Trump, to his credit, actually expanded the policy to include all the government agencies. And what we're seeing here from what the Democrats are trying to do, it's an abortion imperialism, where they're trying to use taxpayer dollars to promote abortion in countries that do not want to see abortion in their countries like from Poland to Uganda to Kenya. And this is just not something that, when we're talking about health, abortion should not be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Marjorie, as a pro-life leader, why is this expanded Mexico City policy so important?
It's huge. It's a banner for what we are about or we're not about. We're either about protecting life internationally in our programs, or if we're undermining life, undermining the cultural values of other nations, undermining our own negotiations on other issues when we've hurt or damaged our own reputation because we're undermining the laws of other countries. The Mexico City policy, which it used to be called, which is now called the Protecting Global Health in Foreign Policy or something like that. Sorry.
Long title.
Whatever the long title is huge because it is a marker about what we stand for, and it also is, I would say, the second most important pro-life policy that President Trump has set down. First being the transformation of the judiciary. Second, it went from $600 million of funding to $8 billion of funding that this policy touched. So it's transformative.
And this vote was one of the first actions we saw this new Congress take. What does this tell us about the next 2 years?
It's both our organizations predicted that different pro-life provisions and different actions by this president would be targeted. Nobody predicted it would happen on January 2nd.
Right.
Except what we're looking at is the most pro-abortion Congress I think we've ever seen. The last time Democrats controlled Congress, there were about 40 self-described pro-life Democrats. Today, there are maybe 2. And that's really going to show, I think, in a lot of the policies they're putting forward.
I think it's remarkable that on January 2nd, that this is one of the first actions as Speaker in the new majority from a Speaker who's talked about a big tent for Democrats on the abortion issue. This is the first thing she does to counter one of the first things that President Trump did when he first took office. So one thing that is a gift, and it is contrast, when we can truly see the difference and the choice that we have in terms of coming elections, but also just in terms of where we want to put our prayers, where we want to put our efforts, and where our lobbying makes sense.
Speaking of members of Congress, are there specific members you'd like to applaud for speaking out against this repeal? And to that same degree, are there members you want to call out that you're disappointed in?
I think Tom and I both have a lot of interaction with different members. I particularly want to praise the Appropriations Chair, the new chair, Kay Granger, who spoke out forcefully on this on the floor of the House. Also, the Minority Leader now, Kevin McCarthy from California. It was very important that they spot this, not let it go very far before it got countered. And then also Virginia Fox, Vicky Hartzler, Chris Smith, Mike Johnson, Jim Banks, Andy Harris, and Doug Lamborn. One stands out who voted the wrong way. 7 so-called pro-life Republicans voted against us on this, and one was Elise Stefanik, who was very disappointing to me. She's in upstate New York. I think she's from your hometown.
She is.
And we expected more from her.
Tom?
I would echo all of those, and especially Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, whose job it is for the motion to recommit. And the motion to recommit, which is the Republicans' one chance to counter the messaging, or the minority party's one chance to counter the messaging of whatever the majority party is putting forward, was solely focused on the life issue, which helped elevate this at a time when the president wasn't really talking about it and the Senate wasn't. One other person I would point out as well is though he might get in trouble for me pointing it out, is Dan Lipinski, the congressman from Illinois, the Democrat, who had to vote against his party's appropriation bill. But what he does is he highlights that this is still a bipartisan issue, and we need courage like that in this new Congress.
Finally, we are in the midst of a government shutdown. If the U.S. House does not pass a pro-life bill, what are your asks of the Senate?
You go first, Tom.
The main thing would be that nothing should pass this Senate and nothing should be sent to the president's desk that isn't pro-life. I believe both our organizations would plan on scoring against anything that would change current pro-life policy. If there's, look, the wall and border security is very important, I know, to a lot of people. For the March for Life, it comes down to the unborn, and there's no better reason to shut down the government than protecting the unborn.
Marjorie?
For funding abortion comes down to a human rights issue for the Democratic Party. They believe it's a human right. If you can't be guaranteed it because you don't have enough money, we need to fund it. It's a worldview transformation from what it should be. So we believe that the president has said he will stand strong on any funding bills. He'll have to veto those bills if anything got to him through the Senate and via the House and the Senate. We believe he'll stand strong on that. Unfortunately, we're in a defensive strategy. Where we're on offense, though, is the continuing transformation of the judiciary, and our hope and expectation that there will be more opportunities to leave a real legacy beyond this presidency and beyond this Senate and beyond this House for many years, where we can actually pass true pro-life laws and have them upheld.
Let's see what these next 2 years bring. Tom McClusky, Marjorie Dannenfelser, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
The U.S. House of Representatives voted last week on a government funding bill to end the shutdown and reopen the government. But included in this bill by the pro-abortion Democratic majority was a poison pill, a measure to completely repeal the Trump administration's Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance policy. This is the policy that ensures not one penny of taxpayer funds will fund overseas organizations that promote or commit abortions. We need to let our U.S. representatives know that we do not want to fund abortions, which brings us to this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com. Again, go to prolifeweekly.com. Here, you can fill out a form that will match you to your member of Congress. You will be able to find out how they voted on this pro-abortion funding bill. Our system will then provide you with a pre-written message that you can send to your U.S. representative to let them know what you think of their vote. Of course, you can make any edits you wish to make the message your own. If your member voted in favor of this pro-abortion bill, the letter will condemn that action. If your member voted against it, the letter will send a message of support. Make sure your U.S. representative knows where you stand on the pro-life issue. Send your letter at prolifeweekly.com. We go now to pro-life headlines from around the globe. In Africa, Reuters reported that Kenya has lifted a ban on Marie Stopes performing abortions in the country. Abortions are not permitted in Kenya unless a woman's life is in danger. Marie Stopes was accused of encouraging women to have elective abortions, a charge the group denied. Kenyan authorities lifted the ban after saying the group was found to be in compliance. This month, Ireland began to permit legalized abortion after voters repealed the country's pro-life 8th Amendment in a referendum last year. Following the vote, Ireland passed legislation permitting unrestricted abortion up to 12 weeks gestation. Also in Europe, the European Court of Human Rights recently accepted a case regarding euthanasia in Belgium. The court will consider the case of Tom Mortier, who says his mother received a lethal injection from a doctor in 2012 after suffering from depression, despite the woman's longtime physician saying she did not meet the country's legal requirements for euthanasia. Belgian authorities have declined to pursue Mortier's case. Turning now to our next segment, as we near the March for Life, the U.S. bishops launched their annual 9 Days for Life prayer initiative.
Join thousands in prayer for the respect of human life from January 14th through the 22nd. Each day of the 9 Days for Life novena highlights a different intention and provides a reflection, related information, and suggested daily actions.
And joining us now is the voice behind that ad, Kat Talalas, the Assistant Director for Pro-Life Communications at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Kat, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
First off, on this program, we regularly encourage our viewers to get involved in the pro-life movement and take action. But can you speak to the pivotal role that prayer plays?
Prayer plays an irreplaceable role in the pro-life movement. Pro-lifers are wonderful because they are so active. They're so eager to do something about the tragedy of abortion, to go volunteer at a pregnancy care center, run a diaper drive, to sidewalk counsel, and those are wonderful things. But God really asks us to stop and discern before we act, to seek His will in everything that we do. So prayer is a really important part of discernment before we take action to prepare us to do His will. Because if we're with God, nothing can be against us.
That's beautiful. So tell us exactly, Kat, what is 9 Days for Life and how can our viewers get involved?
9 Days for Life is a novena for the respect of human life. It goes from January 14th through the 22nd, which is the National Day of Prayer for the protection of the unborn. And it's very easy to get involved. You can sign up at 9daysforlife.com. And right there you can find our website, which has the ways to sign up, which can be via text, email, or you can print the novena out, or you can download our free mobile app.
So if our viewers do sign up, what can they expect in those 9 days?
In addition to receiving the novena intentions for each day, they'll also receive articles, suggestions for action, different ways to encourage and expand their pro-life witness. But the intentions are a very important part of 9 days. While the overarching intention is for an end to abortion, the 9 Days novena also includes other intentions for different days that really contribute to building a culture of life. So there are intentions that support persons with disabilities, that support people who are on the road of adoption. We have a special day for victims of human trafficking and a day for victims of sexual abuse as well.
That's incredible. Kat, I do want to speak about how this is a hard time in the church right now with the clerical sex abuse crisis, and many would say the U.S. bishops have lost their moral authority. So for our viewers, they may be less inclined to get involved. What do you want to say to them and why they should still participate in this U.S. bishops initiative?
Well, the church has failed victims of sexual abuse, and that needs to be acknowledged, and justice for victims needs to be the priority. But we cannot allow the failings of those in authority to prevent us from doing the will of God, which includes praying for the most vulnerable. If we don't pray for the most vulnerable, who will? And this initiative especially is so powerful. We have over 100,000 people who are signed up to pray for life. And that is just a tremendous witness and a tremendous opportunity. And we have to take advantage of that and continue to be the light in the world.
Finally, Kat, can you preview any other initiatives that our viewers should know about?
Yes, the Pro-Life Secretariat is also co-sponsoring the Pro-Life Vigil Mass at the Basilica. And it's such an exciting event. Over 20,000 people usually attend. So it's really another wonderful opportunity to show a witness for life before the March for Life.
Absolutely, and EWTN will be covering it, so stay tuned to this network. Kat Talalas, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
When we come back,
I'm really happy that as someone coming from a scientific background and having that education that I get to And having it from an Ivy League university, which is considered, one of the most elite universities in the world, I'm really happy that I can give that kind of scientific viewpoint.
Find out about a pro-life group at an Ivy League school, and you'll be seeing more of them very soon. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. An abortion activist recently appeared on the popular YouTube series Kids Meet to tell children about her abortion procedure. That's this week's Speak Out segment.
What do you think God thinks about abortion?
I think it's all part of God's plan.
In a recent installment of the Kids Meet series, Amelia Bono, one of the activists behind the Shout Your Abortion campaign, sat down with children to spout pro-abortion talking points.
Do you think that sometimes it's not okay to have an abortion?
I want to say if you're being reckless, if there's nothing wrong going on.
I don't know. I just don't agree. Do we want people to just have all those babies?
No.
So what do we do with them?
Bono goes on to call the pro-life label propaganda because, the abortion advocate claims, pro-lifers don't want to take care of babies. I would like to say this to Ms. Bono in return. Show me the Planned Parenthood preschools. You won't be able to find any because pro-lifers are the very ones volunteering and serving and giving their energy to maternity homes to care for women who choose life and their babies, whom abortion advocates would rather see not born. Elsewhere in this lie-filled video, Bono muses on how she believes people come from different backgrounds with how they think about when life begins. When it comes to unborn life, she asks, is it an arm? Is it a sea cucumber? Is it a baby? This is an alarming example of science denial. When life begins is not a matter of opinion. When life begins is a scientific fact. And when Ms. Bono says otherwise, she is lying to children. She is doing the opposite of educating them. Finally, to call abortion part of God's plan is straight up diabolical. And a reminder for all of us that we need to pray for Amelia Bono and all of those who spread this propaganda. Remember, there is always something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com to find out how your U.S. representative voted on the pro-abortion funding bill and send your member a letter. Abortion activists would like you to think they are on the side of science and intellect. We should introduce them to our next guest, one of the speakers you'll see at the March for Life rally stage next week. Here is this week's Pro-Life Focus.
It's such an exciting time in the pro-life movement.
The March for Life rally stage is reserved for the top pro-life leaders.
Because of all of you and the many thousands who stand with us in marches like this all across the nation, life is winning again in America.
This year, you'll see the youngest speaker on the stage is one with an impressive resume and mind.
The sequence begins with 0 and 1. To obtain each next number, add the first two.
Ali Cavazos is a senior at Princeton University and president of Princeton Pro-Life. She'll be included in this year's 2019 lineup of March for Life speakers, which will also include conservative commentator and Harvard grad Ben Shapiro, bipartisan pro-life congressional speakers, and a former abortionist. The theme for this year's March for Life is unique from day one. Pro-life is pro-science. It's a natural fit for this chemical and biological engineering major. Tell us how science informs your pro-life views.
So this is a great question. And I think, through biology, we know that a unique human life begins during conception. And from that point onward, there's an entire human organism present. It's not just part of the mother, because the DNA is different than the mother's. And it's not just part of a whole person the way that my arm is just a part of me. It's an entire human organism. And this is what science tells us. What science doesn't tell us is what we should do with that information. But most people would agree that it's wrong to take innocent human life. So if we can just get people to see that this is human life, then we've already done a lot of the work at that point. I'm really happy that as someone coming from a scientific background and having that education that I get to, and having it from an Ivy League university, which is considered, one of the most elite universities in the world, I'm really happy that I can give that kind of scientific viewpoint and lend that support.
She won't be the only Princeton presence, as Allie's fellow pro-life club members will join her in carrying the official March for Life banner through the streets. The selection is seen as an honor, something they're not necessarily used to on their own campus. You have led Princeton Pro-Life as president for 2 years. Tell us about what it's like being pro-life at an Ivy League school.
Well, when it comes to the university, I get the impression a lot of times that the administration is more supportive of pro-abortion groups than they are of us. And I think that's how it is at many universities. But they do let us have a presence on campus, and they let us do our thing, and I'm very grateful for that. For instance, they actually let me show a film called Pro-Life Feminist, and they let us host pro-life speakers. And I've never had any issues in terms of trying to put on an event. So that's a really good thing. But the other thing is that it's also the case that pro-abortion groups don't always want to engage with us. For instance, it's actually the official policy of one of the pro-abortion groups here to never engage with the opposition, which would be us. And I've reached out to that group's leadership multiple times, and they've never been receptive to us. And actually, at one of their events, I tried to point out the disproportionate effect that abortion has on minority communities, which is something that I care about as a Hispanic. And the student just kind of told me, look, if you don't agree with us, you don't have to, without really trying to respond to what I was saying.
With this year's pro-science theme, the March for Life hopes participants can better respond to the false claim the pro-life movement is anti-science. It's a lie that Allie can easily disprove.
We're definitely not anti-science. New scientific advancements continue to inform us about the development of human life in the womb. For instance, we know that babies in the womb are capable of feeling pain some point well before they're due to be born, which is why anesthesia is routinely administered during fetal surgeries. So I think that science is a really helpful tool in pointing us toward the right thing to do, which is to treat unborn lives as fully human lives that are in need of our protection.
From Princeton to Washington, this impressive young woman will surely give us a speech to remember at next week's March for Life. Can you give us a preview? What are you going to tell the crowd?
I think you'll just have to wait and stay tuned and, wait for the march to hear exactly what I'm going to say. But I'm really hoping that my speech gets people to think about the experience of being human and the gift of life.
That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. But before we go, I need to recognize my favorite viewer's milestone birthday, the viewer who first introduced me to EWTN when I was a young girl. My grandmother, Donna Jean Bailey, turned 100 years old this week. And in her 100 years, she has experienced a century's worth of ups and downs and has remained close to Christ through it all. She has 10 children, including my mother, and countless grandchildren and great-grandchildren. As she reaches this rare club of centenarians, my grandmother continues to teach me so much, including the great value there is to every stage in life. Grandmother, happy 100th birthday. I love you. Until next time, you can reach me at Pro-Life Weekly at EWTN.com or by liking my public Facebook page. Just search for Catherine Hadro. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.